And we should be live. Oh, Karen, will you please share your Facebook? You're live on Facebook.
Okay. So how do I do that? I go to your
go to my
Facebook.
page. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yep, let me do that.
I'm going to pull up Facebook here. We are recording. So if you are watching us live from Facebook, please put any questions that you might have in the comments. And the disclaimer is that Dr. Karen Duca is not a medical doctor. She's a scientist. She's a PhD. She studies viruses, particularly the coronavirus, and she will come at this conversation from a scientific perspective. So, and then I think that we have mostly regulars here today on the call on Zoom. You guys know the drill. Please give us your questions in the Q&A. And here we go. We're going to get this going here.
Okay, good.
So I can monitor our Facebook page.
All right. Excellent. Okay, great.
You're welcome. So it looks like I'm live, but now, oh, here, I'm gonna move it.
Is everything okay?
Yep, we're live. We're perfect. Okay. Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, good.
Okay. So Karen, do you want to begin with,
Okay.
we do have some questions. Cece has a question.
Okay. Yeah, we can
Q&A
start.
question. Why don't you give us an overview?
Okay, well, what I wanted to say, I mean, I think at this point, we're all seeing the numbers, right? I don't think I need to really say what's happening in those terms, but I want to remind you of something. Remember when we started this way back when? I just want to show you, there was a prediction of how many cases there would be by August 4th.
Oh,
Way
yes,
back when we started. And I just wanted to remind everybody that the high end of the prediction was 160,000, okay? So we definitely hit the high end of the prediction, which I wasn't expecting, honestly. And, you know, we've seen people fatigued of, you know, shelter in place and, you know, just cases, runaway cases in a lot of places. There have been fascinating research results released. We're starting to see a lot of validation of things we thought, okay? We're seeing validation. We're seeing a few surprises. We're seeing that we're getting a little bit better at, you know, treating the disease. So we're lowering our death rate. That's all good. But we have our public health infrastructure and our testing are just in a shambles. And that's what's causing the problems we have today. There's a lot of confusion about schools. And the data, wow, are very, we're starting to get some helpful things, but you know, nothing is without risk, okay? So we'll touch on all of these things through people's questions. But that's kind of like the state of things now, where we're in a runaway situation, you know, and I suspect we really are getting some benefit from a heat reduction in, you know, viral stability outside. I think we're actually, believe it or not, I think the heat is helping us. And when we lose that in October and November, fasten your seatbelts, ladies and gents. It's not getting better. It'll get worse.
That's scary.
It is a little bit, but.
So in other words, I shouldn't buy my plane ticket to go to Pennsylvania for Thanksgiving. Is this what you're telling me, Karen?
Well, you know, wait a little bit to make that decision, because, you know, there are some things about, you know, depending on, you know, the crowds, depending on your trajectory there, even you know, a plane ride to Pennsylvania from California, if it's a direct flight.
No, there really are no direct flights to
There's no
Pennsylvania
direct
from
flights.
Los Angeles.
Your riskiest moments are in the airports and, you know, that getting to the airport, that kind of thing. So yeah, it might not be the smartest move.
Okay.
But
That's noted.
It could be, you know, it could still be okay, but a lot of things that would have to fall into place. So
Yeah.
stay tuned and keep an eye on things. And I can also address a little bit, there's an interesting public health debate going on right now about a second lockdown.
Okay.
And there's always been issues. There have always been very solid public health experts on both sides of a lockdown.
So somebody was telling me about a Stanford study that they had read this last week. Are you familiar with the Stanford study that's
Which one? Because I've seen so many.
I don't know.
So many studies are coming out these days that.
Okay, so the study, the one part that I thought was interesting that he said was that they're seeing something about 25% of the population getting the disease, and then once 25% of the population gets the disease, that it starts to flatten.
Okay, that study actually came out earlier, and it's a model, okay? It's predictive, it's not data-based. There's a group at Stanford saying that to reach herd immunity, their theory is that we could get to herd immunity with a lot lower levels than we have historically believed, okay? Historically, there's been a belief that herd immunity, the percent you need for herd immunity, is in direct proportion to how transmissible the virus is. Now, that's a generality, assuming the virus transmits in a lot of different ways. What the Stanford people have done, as I understand it, it's a little more sophisticated, and it looks at the specific ways the virus spreads and how infected people are for how long, etc. So they are somewhat of an outlier group in predicting that herd immunity can be reached with a lot lower than we think. I mean, most groups would tell you it'd be very high, certainly above 60% or more. Now they are saying it could be 25 or 30. They are alone in that prediction, and they could be right. Everything is new here with this virus, and what I can say is our modeling is so much more sophisticated than it used to be, but it's all super sensitive to assumptions. That's why the Imperial College model was so wacko, and everybody thought Imperial College was some lousy school. It's one of the best epidemiological modeling groups on the planet. They're amazing. But they made assumptions that people would not comply with lockdown. They had predicted 2.5 million deaths in the US by now. They were wrong about our compliance. But they were not, put it this way, let me just give you an example. Most European countries that got this under control had lockdowns of up to 90% compliance. At best, the US had near 50, 50-ish, okay? And it was very, very dependent on the nature of your job, where you work, your income level, etc. Now, how Europe is different from us, and I've just got to rant a little bit, that the US is still living in the 18th century when the country was founded. The world has changed, and we should have different structures. The way the Europeans handled unemployment payments, they gave the money generally to the companies who then paid the workers. You didn't have to stand in line at an unemployment, go down to the employment center for your city. The methodology for taking care of their population was in place. It's more sophisticated, it's easier. We had trouble, people even even getting the money they were entitled to and promised because of, so much bureaucracy and the need for personal computer at home and so many other things. Europeans had far, far better systems. So they achieved a 90% lockdown. Now, granted, they were starting with community levels way lower than we have now, way lower. So they could achieve it a little bit faster than we would be able to. If we lock down tomorrow at 90%, first of all, some people would starve. They wouldn't be able to pay their rents, their mortgages. It would be an absolute disaster. We physically don't have the social safety net to do it, which is why we lock down only at 50%-ish. Okay, the next thing about that, New Zealand, okay? New Zealand doesn't have the virus, it's gone, okay? They were so smart early on about, not letting people in, quarantining. Okay, that kind of thing, they're still doing it. They know where the virus is and they're keeping others out. So those guys are doing great. Korea, Japan, Vietnam, countries that were hard hit with SARS and MERS got their act together for this. And there's also some new information that's very interesting that could be contributing to their lower death rates. Okay, first, they're a younger population, generally healthier than the US population. But on top of that, that's where a lot of bats live. Okay, so there's some theory that the populations come into contact a little bit more with bats, and they might have some pre-existing immunity from exposure to milder coronaviruses that they didn't even know they got exposed to. Now, this is very hypothetical, but there might be something to that. That has been thought about Chinese populations in certain cities where there's a lot of bats.
Interesting.
Yeah, but what they did, the testing, what was a crime with us, people were willing to lock down and did it to the best of their ability for 3 months. Did we get testing capacity in place? No, we did not. We started off with a screw up in reagents at the CDC. And generally, we made the mistake of only having our public health labs doing the testing. We did not bring the commercial labs online. They have since come online. We've barely started to tap the university labs, which have tons more capacity than the commercial labs. Now, the places where they have brought the university labs online, you can pull up, get tested, and they say, wait in the parking lot and we'll come out with your result in 30 minutes, okay? Now, that's because they had huge numbers of machines and they can bring personnel in who know how to do these assays. We've hardly done that cross country. I mean, different spaces like really strong schools with great faculties of medicine, U of Washington, Emory, some of these places, they got it nailed, Johns Hopkins, but we just haven't, it's not systematic, it's state by state, and this is our problem. We didn't use the time we bought ourselves to get our acts together. And now, like in some places, tests take so long to get the result that they are not of any value for you.
Right.
Unless you voluntarily shelter in place just because you got a test, right?
Well, that's what you're supposed to do, right?
I mean, I don't know. It depends why you got the test. If you got the test because a coworker was infected and you want to be safe rather than sorry, why would you necessarily shelter in place?
Well, that's what when you go anywhere and they're asking you questions about COVID, they ask you if you've been in contact with anybody that has COVID. I mean, right?
Well, right, but here's the problem. I'll use my brother as an example. He was told, he works at Target. He was told an employee at Target was diagnosed with COVID, we'll pay for a test so you can see if you're okay. Because of HIPAA regulations, he wasn't told who that employee was. He may have never crossed paths with that person.
Right.
Or he may have worked side by side with him. So he got his test and it took him 4 or 5 days to even get his result. had he been positive, he wasn't, he was negative, but if he'd been positive, he would have been symptomatic potentially. So should he have sheltered in place? I would not have done so in his case, because there was no reason to believe that. We know casual contact doesn't really spread it, and all the employees were masking at that time, as were most of the the shoppers. Right. So yeah, if you get a COVID test on the fact that somebody that you saw, that you work with or whatever, chances are you're going to be negative. It's the family units. Like, we are really seeing that this is where massive spreading, the super spreading events, close contact, bars, restaurants, parties, and family units that, in close quarters. We really know now what the highest risk scenarios are when you're getting really, in others' faces and so forth. So, I mean, just because you're getting a test, you also could be getting a test because you want to go somewhere and they're going to require that negative when you cross into the border. So, I mean, I think it's not that simple. And if everyone who got a test had to shelter in place, it would be very disruptive.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of questions, but I have one more question before we jump into them. And it might be too big of a question to ask, but I'm going to ask anyway. Moving forward, like, because we have this public health issue, like, our public health system just was not prepared anyway for this. Nor our sort of economic platform, our social economic platform.
Yeah, we've got no safety net to speak of. We've got this over-reliance on individualism left over from the days when everybody shot their own meat, and that's not the modern world, and I think we've got to think differently.
Right. But in terms of public health itself, what are the next steps? Like, what is, like, do you see some sort of, I mean, we're in the middle of a crisis right now, so maybe it's not the time for this conversation, but is there going to be some sort of ramp up to, like, figuring this out so that the next time a coronavirus issue hits us, that we're more prepared for it?
Well, honestly, I mean, this is just an opinion. There are fantastic people who know exactly what to do and are saying what they are, giving recommendations as we speak. Peter Hotez, really interesting vaccinologist. I think he's at the University of Texas, Galveston. He's warning people. He's saying this is going to get way worse. And, vaccines aren't going to be the whole solution. So just really take the recommendations very seriously. Michael Osterholm, fantastic public health expert in Minneapolis. He's calling for a 6 to 8 week serious lockdown. He's saying that would at least buy us time. At least it would reduce the community spread. Personally, at this point, I don't think the population will accept it. We can't get people to wear masks. We can't get people to not go to restaurants and bars. And we're asking them. I personally do an office job, and I've been working from home since March. But I don't see that being accepted at this stage of the game. So consequently, the vaccines are moving. I mean, warp speed is very true. They're moving as fast as humanly possible, and people are doing an amazing job. I am hopeful long term. By next spring, I think things are going to look different because of the ability to get vaccinated. But we've yet to know how protective any of the vaccines are going to be, okay? Some are fantastic. Some just make the illness a little bit milder. it'll be something, okay? Lives will be saved. But what I think we've all got to start getting used to is we're going to be wearing masks for quite some time if we want to protect
Get your
ourselves.
assortment of masks.
So get
Invest in
yourself,
your masks.
make them nice, make them pretty,
How cute is this one that I have? By the way, this one I got last weekend.
Oh, no, I do have some information about bandana masks. Okay, Duke University has come out with something.
Okay.
All right.
Tell me. Do tell.
Yeah, there's some new, I have some bad news, that bandana mask. There are some masks that don't work quite as well as others. Okay, so let's go through what works best, and we'll work from best to worst. But I do want to say that bandana masks are better than nothing, much better than nothing. They did coughing tests, okay? Now the N95s, nothing gets out, okay?
Yeah, it's rock solid.
Rock solid. But then the next best thing, let me get an example. Something not half bad are these things you buy, they're made of cotton, at least a dual layer. They're well fitted, the kind of cotton things people make at home with those patterns from the New York Times. All well and good. They work pretty well. You can use a bandana or a handkerchief, but you want to fold it. You don't want just one layer, okay? You want folded over, and you want to have it fitted as much as possible.
Okay, what I like about this particular bandana is that it's soft material. It is doubled, and because of the way that it is, it's not stiff. When I tie it, it's really tight here. It's not loose, so it's even tight around my chin. So I don't know if that helps or not, but I like it, especially because it's pretty. We've lost Karen. She's getting another mask, probably, is my guess. We should bring everybody on and show our masks.
So here's a way to do something like that. Now, the bandana things, and I'm actually, now when I go to where there's crowds, because things are getting more crowded, I'm actually wearing one of those plastic face shields over my mask. Okay,
Tell us why you're doing that.
Just as an extra level of protection.
Okay.
Right? So here is a way, like here's my bandana. Like as you can see, it's fairly thin. You can see right through it. So what I'm going to do, I'm folding it actually in thirds. So now I've got 3 layers of cloth, and I take these things like here, hairbands for people that want to make ponytails. Now I'm going to put them on the end of this thing, bend it over. I'm going to put it on the end over here, bend it over, right? And now I just put it on my ears, and voila.
How is it totally attached to the, how is that attached?
To my ears?
How does it attach to the handkerchief?
I just fold it over like this. It doesn't attach. I just make a fold. Make a fold.
It stays. Okay.
And it stays. It stays because it's now firmly against my mouth, and it, nobody's pulling on it or anything. It's perfect. It feels great. It's comfy. Okay. So that's not bad.
So what else do we learn from Duke?
Okay, there's something important. The neck gaithers that are knitted and fleece materials actually make things worse because they break droplets up into aerosols. Okay, so you know that I use neck gaithers, so now I can't use I was using hijabs, and they were knitted, kind of a knitted fabric. They weren't cotton. So now I have to stop my hijabs, and I have to stop my neck gaithers that I do sometimes use. I could put them on over something like this, but honestly speaking, these guys, the only places I don't wear this, I sometimes wear those cloth ones at the gym because it's a little more breathable. There's a trade-off between breathability and protection, right? And we are talking mostly protecting others. When I'm wearing the face shield, that gives me a little more protection for myself, because I've noticed, DC's pretty good. We never opened completely, but I see more people in the grocery store. I went to get some routine blood tests and I was stunned by how crowded the office was. I don't think they had done well. So that's just my decision, Nothing is going to be guaranteed. And we all know about, the 10 feet. It's not 6, it's really 10 feet between people. And
Oh,
yeah,
Beth, that's a good thing to know for the kiddos. 10 feet.
yeah, yeah.
So, okay. Beth thinks we're hilarious, just so you know. We've lost
We are
Brian.
hilarious.
We lost Brian, who was our biggest fan, because he's been parking cars well, I don't know what he's doing now. He was parking cars at church, but then they closed the churches, but then they're having outdoor church on Sunday nights. Maybe he's there setting up. I don't
Maybe
know.
he's
We've
setting up.
lost him.
Yeah, it could be setting up.
Um,
Yeah. Well, he'll see it on the Facebook later.
Yeah, that's good to know. Okay. So let's go to I don't know if we answered the question about public health. So there are some people that are stating what should happen, including the guy in Minneapolis and the person at UT Galveston. So there's some great public health experts with opinions, but your fear is that nobody wants to follow the public health anyway. So it doesn't matter.
Right. I mean, do you think that another lockdown, even 6 to 8 weeks, would be accepted by the American public right now? I just don't think so. I could be wrong and a decision will be made. It's not for me to make the decision.
Well,
But
I think it's interesting, Karen, because I've been thinking about this a lot myself, like in terms of my own mental, emotional, spiritual health. And hey, Zubin has a couple questions. Zubin's calling from Mallorca, or calling, whatever.
Ooh.
Okay, Zubin, we'll get to you, hon. I see you. I see you. Yay. And Zubin, okay, let me just give a little, I know we're out there today, but I think we have all regulars today. So let's just be free.
Yeah, we got regulars, so we can go as wild and crazy as
what's interesting is that Zubin and his wife, Brenda, are very good friends of mine, and they live in Mallorca. And what has happened that they decided to do during this COVID time is to create a farm, a sustainable farm. They live on a farm, but it wasn't a working farm. They bought this, it was an old almond farm. And so they've done these amazing things. But what's really cool today, Zubin, I saw Brenda had posted a couple of pictures of sheep, because they don't have sheep themselves, but there's a sheep farmer who needed a place for his sheep to graze. And because they're creating a permaculture and doing all of this. It's amazing. Anyway, so we're going to get to you in a second, Zubin. Just stay put. Stay put. I'm so happy Zubin's here. So, where were we? Oh, okay. Okay. I got it. So,
public health recommendations.
Mental health. Hold on. Mental health. That's where we were. Okay. Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot about this, right? Myself, because I was, I had some emotional stuff that I was dealing with between the COVID and the BLM movement. And, and as I think most of you know, like I work in a world where I process my emotions. I teach people how to process their emotions. Like I'm in this, like I'm in it. And I was pretty sideways at some point here. I'm pretty depressed,
Me too, absolutely. All of us.
Kara does the work too. So, but then it was interesting because July hit and I came to this place of absolute surrender. Like, I'm just like, I'm in this. My son and I go to play golf on Friday nights at a beautiful public course down the street that, it's a perfect COVID activity. We're outside in the beautiful sunset. We're in the fresh air. You go at twilight. It's $10. For him, it was $1 in the month of July. Like we could play a round of golf for like, $11. So anyway, I kind of settled into it. My thing is that I feel like and I don't know, maybe we're like, I'm speaking to the choir, right? Preaching to the choir. But, I feel like if someone were to tell me, hey, if we all lock down again, and I guess there's a mistrust that's going on too, but I'm for whatever is the right thing to do. Like, that's my thing. Like, that's what I think. but I guess I'm more for the whole.
You can work from
individual.
home. That's the biggest thing. Why we didn't close down 100% is because,
Yeah,
look, the essential workers have no option, and many people can't afford loss of income.
yeah,
So it's like we don't have that European system where if I don't show up, I'm still getting paid. Even if you are eligible to get some relief, there's a lot of hoops you have to jump
yeah.
through, and you're not
I
even
know
sure.
a lot of people that were having problems getting the money. Like I
Absolutely,
knew somebody
money
that
hasn't been
a
spent.
friend of mine's friend. She's a single mom. She had lost her ability. Her phone got shut off because she didn't have any money. She needed her phone in order to get unemployment. It was like this whole thing.
There were all these catch-22s, and frankly speaking, a lot of the stimulus hasn't been claimed, and it's a crime. It's like I'm just kind of up in arms about this right now because I did the lockdown. I only went and got food. I did everything right.
Hmm.
And my government squandered that valuable time and didn't get structures in place. And well, part of it, my big hope, if there's a new administration come January, 90% of these problems will be solved within 3 months, okay?
Well, I mean, by the way, I hope that you're right. And I don't want
That's
to get
right.
political.
We don't
I
know,
hope you're right, but
Yeah.
who knows? I will only believe. And by the way,
You'll believe it
I'll
when you
believe when I
see it.
see it. Okay, let's go to Zubin's questions because he's on Facebook, and sometimes we lose
Okay.
on Facebook, and then we'll go back because I know we've got some questions in the Q&A and a couple of questions in the chat. Because
No
Zubin, here
problem.
you go. Do we wait for a vaccine so everybody wears a mask to give us time to find a vaccine? That's number one. Do we wait for a vaccine so everyone wears a mask to give us time to? Are we wearing masks to buy time for the vaccine?
No, we're wearing masks to reduce the transmission rates immediately. We're not buying masks. Any kind of public health intervention. We're going to have treatments before we'll have vaccines for the general public. The idea is reduce morbidity and mortality as much as possible by wearing a mask, social distancing, and not going to big events. This is protecting both you and everyone you interact with. The buy time thing, the lockdown, the whole idea of lockdown, we were not even buying time for vaccine. Like that has been started. That work is going as fast as humans can carry it on. And we have 3 front-running horses looking good. By the end of next year, we should have 7 vaccines on the market, I predict, if everything goes good in the phase 3 clinicals. But right now, what the lockdown bought time for, we flattened the curve to not overwhelm the healthcare system, because not only would we have had a higher death rate, but the healthcare system for every other kind of sickness or injury or trauma would have been compromised. So we could have literally collapsed our health system in certain places like New York where things were bad. So that was the point of, we bought time for hospitals to get ventilators, to get PPE, to get structures in place. And for the most part, they've done that. We're not in the place we were in March where hospitals couldn't cope.
Yeah.
They're doing pretty well coping, even in hard hit places, because they had time to get the stuff they need to do it. They're letting, with your medical students, they're letting them practice now, even before they take their licensing exam in some places, and they can. I mean, they know their stuff. So, we're doing better with that. So that's what the lockdown brought us. Masks are primarily reducing the spread. There is a little bit of self-protection there too, but you're primarily protecting others with your mask wearing.
So it's a selfish thing. And that kind of goes to his question number 2 is, do we wear a mask to stem the tide on to not overwhelm the hospitals? And that answer is yes. His third question is, given we have no vaccine for herd immunity, So our economy, wait, hold on. Given we have no vaccine, go for herd immunity. Oh, since we have no vaccine, should we go for herd immunity so that our economy is not devastated? Sweden seems to have got it right with keeping the elderly protected and allowing life to exist normally to not devastate the economy.
Okay, now this is they were public health officials. There was a very famous guy at Yale. What was his name? David Katz. I can't remember his name, but he was advocating for no lockdown from the beginning. He was saying all a lockdown does is delays the cases. It doesn't prevent them. So let's just get it over with and get enough herd immunity. Viruses tend to be self-limiting. They burn themselves out when all the susceptible hosts have already got it and they've got some level of protection. So that debate has been there from the start, okay? I think what people want to do now with lockdown is get us to low enough community spread, low enough positivity in testing that the schools are safer and we can start doing other things. Like I think the public would have been a lot happier to have a 1 month extreme lockdown, then a little release, then maybe a 2 weeks extreme lockdown. But you know, we squandered the time that we had with the lockdown when cases were going down. But I will say, I don't think Sweden is that much of a poster child. There was a time where Swedish cases were as bad as ours, you know, per capita in the population. And they did protect their nursing homes better. They had a very different philosophy. But Brazil had the same as Sweden, and now they're number 2 behind us. You know, there are a few countries that are very bad. Brazil, India, South Africa, us, you know. So it's a complex equation. It's a combination of things, and only one of them is lockdown. How good is the testing? How fast do you get your results so you know how to behave? And, you know, we're not doing great with that. So
Zuba, if you have any follow-up questions, let us know. Interestingly, Zubin's from India.
oh, is it? Okay. Yeah, India's really struggling now. They're going to be our next real problem. And they had the issue of large populations moving around back to home villages and stuff. And, you know, their testing is, I doubt it's, you know, very fast results outside the big cities, right? Yeah. Maybe they can't even get tests outside the big cities. So, you know, it's a different, in every place, there's a different context and a different set of challenges and a different set of positive things going for them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And every culture is different, right? The way that people
exactly.
And the way
and
they
the
react,
Swedes
and
are very, the Swedes, I mean, they very much have a socially minded mentality. Do you see any other country saying not wearing a mask is their God-given right? Have you seen that in any other country? Maybe a few in Canada, but I've not seen that anywhere.
I've actually seen that in Canada. Someone that I knew.
Canada's the only one because they're so much like us, at least along the border, right?
Although, I don't know if Zubin's still with us, but I mean, he could speak to, I think, at least my interaction with him and his wife, Brenda, was that, I mean, Spain was really on lockdown. Like they were really, I mean, and they weren't
the
mainland there in
lockdowns were much
pretty
better.
Significant. Seemed like it was much more so than what we were experiencing.
90%, absolutely. Spain locked down up to 90%. However, Spain had a far less problem than we do now.
But in the beginning, it seemed like they had a huge problem.
Right, but again, huge then relative to huge now is a night and day different affair. Right. The number of cases per capita then were, like, if we could reach that, we'd consider ourselves hugely successful. If we had the number of cases per capita that they had at their worst, you know, I mean, but
what
again,
about Italy? Like, where do we compare? Remember, Italy was really like horrible, right? Where do we compare to Italy?
Oh yeah, we're passing that kind of stuff. We can go look at the website if you want to compare that.
I guess that the major difference is that we're more equipped from a hospital
We can
perspective
handle
than
it better.
Italy was
Yeah, we're
back in
way
March.
better than Spain,
Yeah,
Italy, France. All of Europe was taken by surprise.
yeah.
But they got their act together fast.
Well,
And
let's.
Germany was the real poster child, in my
Mhm.
opinion.
Well, why don't we look at let's go to the questions that we have since people don't have to wait so long for their questions to be answered, and then let's look at maybe some numbers. Good idea. So I'm going to go to CC has a question. Aside from general poor health care available, are there studies that indicate that there are genetic indicators that I date that people of color are predisposed to have a severe reaction to COVID?
Okay, so as far as we know, up until now, there's almost nothing of that nature that's been identified. Okay, up to now, it tends to be comorbidities, primarily diabetes, obesity, and overweight. Those are the main ones, particularly in African American communities. The protective, and this is only slight, O-type blood, estrogen, okay, and particularly young women, taking oral contraceptives get a double protection.
Oh,
And interestingly, the O blood type and the estrogen tend to use very similar mechanistic ways that's doing it. So that's why the women are a little bit protected, but after menopause, we don't believe that the women and the men, there's a distinction, right? When you match them for health status, older men and older women appear to be equally affected.
should we all go on the birth control pill?
Well, there's a lot of complexities with that too. It's there's for the older women with estrogen replacement, the data are mixed in terms of whether it's helping, but there does seem to be a slight protection with estrogen. And there's also a slight, there's another thing like A blood type is also slightly more susceptible to, worse outcomes. And again, this doesn't mean you won't get it if you're O type, or you're going to definitely have a bad experience if you're A type. Not at all. These are just slight shifts, and they only appear at the population level. For any given individual, you don't see that.
The variants are shown when you're looking at a big data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So just to go back to Zubin for a second, because I think you answered that question. He says, yes, we were on serious lockdown. I was talking to a friend yesterday who said his business grossed 60 million a year. Today he is at 8 million. Serious damage to his business. The Swedish economy seems okay. Only time will tell if they were right. In Mallorca, the economy is down by 34%, and we have less overall deaths this year than we had last year.
Yeah, no, there's definitely an economic hit was taken. And by the way, even in Sweden, I heard that their economy contracted by 9 or 10%. So even they had some issues. I mean, nobody got out of this unscathed, not even Taiwan, which has almost no deaths, and they've contained it, not New Zealand, not South Korea, not Vietnam, where the death rates were well under 1%, the case fatality rate, well under 1%. Now, okay, so more questions, because I have some interesting facts from some papers I'll also share, but let's get people's questions.
Okay, great. Okay, so April is asking, I haven't before heard about the 10-foot social distancing. Can you please explain that?
Oh, okay, well, here's where that came from. 6 feet was for droplets, which will hit the ground before 6 feet. 10 feet are for aerosols, which are a lot lighter and can go a lot further. 6 feet started before we were admitting airborne transmission, let's say.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Okay, so Arnie Paulson is asking, Michael Mina from Harvard is advocating for a cheap $1 test that everyone can administer themselves each morning. Not as accurate as the PCR test, but quick and easy and accurate enough. Can't get it approved because it is held to the PCR standard. Please comment on this if you can.
Well, actually, that's not quite true. There are at least 40 companies working on these antigen style detectors. You guys all heard about the governor of Ohio who tested positive, then negative twice. He
Mhm.
was using one of those. He was using one of those antigen tests, which aren't as accurate. Okay, so his first positive result probably wasn't any good. They're rolling out 5 million of them in England this fall, and we definitely are not holding it to PCR standard. Because no test on the planet can be held to PCR standard, and it's a genetic test. The PCR test looks for the presence of the viral genome. And we've had other kinds of things like this for many years. We test for malaria using these rapid tests. They're not as good as looking for the parasite under a microscope, but they're fast and accurate enough. So yeah, we're going to see those home testing things. That will be absolutely game changing. What I've heard so far, the cost of them can be anywhere between $1 and $5. And the idea is you don't necessarily test yourself every morning, but maybe every second or third day, depending. Like if you get a positive, you might test yourself daily just to be sure it's a real positive. And let's face it, it'll help a lot, because the minute you get a positive, then you will self-isolate. So if it's a false positive, big deal, you self-isolated a couple of days. But if you get the next one and the next one after that negative, well then okay, go on back out again. So yeah, they will be wonderful, and companies are working on them. They have to be better than 50-50, right? I mean, they've got to be they don't have to be perfect, but their accuracy cannot be, no better than flipping a coin.
Right.
And I'm not saying they're that bad at all, but I haven't followed them as carefully. I'm going to start looking into it because people have been asking me a lot about them. Then, if we can get them to 80% accurate, boy, that's great.
How do you administer that test?
It's probably spitting. It could be.
Spit test, yeah.
It's unlikely to be blood prick, like that's the malaria one. But yeah, I think these are probably going to be spitting or nasal swab or something
Right.
like
Oh, that initial one that Adrian had was blood. Remember that?
Right, that's an antibody though. Antibodies you're going to find in the bloodstream.
But that was
You're not
both
going to find
antibody and it was IgG and IG.
an IgM, right? Two
yeah.
stages of antibody. The IgM are the early ones. The IgG are the longer ones. But you're not going to find viral proteins floating around in the blood. Most likely not. You're going to. That's the difference. The PCR is extremely sensitive because it amplifies. You can get one copy of a viral genome, and then the nature of the reaction is such that it amplifies that so you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Antigen, you have to find the viral proteins. And if there's not very much of them, you can miss them, okay? Yeah. And if you find another type of protein that has similarities such that it'll cross-react with the reagents in the at-home kit, you'll test positive, even though what you might have is just the common cold human coronavirus.
Right.
So those are the issues. They're not as accurate, but because you can test frequently and have immediate feedback, they'll be wonderful. And we're moving towards that. I don't know where those stand. I haven't followed those quite as much as I followed the vaccines, but I'll start now.
What's interesting about it, I think, is from like a school perspective, the schools, kids could test.
Yeah, you could
every day before school. And it would be like a good way to sort of keep things at bay potentially at schools, right?
But also think about this. Even if we get it to $1 a test, which I don't see it getting that low. But at the retail and $1 a test, that means you're going to be spending $30 a day if you want. $30 a month if you
that's a lot.
for one kid. If you've got 3 kids, you're spending $90. I mean, who can afford that? And
Yeah.
what if you do get a positive, then you might want to do more. Like, I think it would be every few days that you test. It wouldn't have to be absolutely daily, but yeah, that would matter. Like the kids who test positive, okay, you're online for that day and your pod can't come to you, until, you do a negative. My fear is people will be doing 5 tests a day trying to get to a negative, But again, that's not to worry about. Once we have that, here's what I want to emphasize though. Remember that picture that went viral, that girl in Georgia who got suspended because she took a picture of a hallway where the kids were just moving between classes, not social distancing, only half were wearing masks, and she got suspended? And then
No,
the photo,
I don't know that
oh,
story.
well, okay. So this is a girl, she took a photo in her high school corridor, and it looked like it would have last year, a bunch of kids all packed together.
Just typical. Yeah.
Typical. Half of them had masks on, half didn't, and she got suspended for putting that on her Facebook. Of course, that was reversed immediately. Okay, that got reversed. But guess what? 9 kids at that school have now tested positive, and this just happened last week. So
why are they in session already? That's an early session.
no, Georgia starts early. They started on August 5th. They have a different school year. But and Indiana had to shut down after 3 days of opening because of the spread. The reality is, even if we're testing, as long as we have high levels in the community, we can't go back to school. We, fully, we'll have to do partial online, because what about all these many kids who are going to test positive? Especially some new data from Korea is very encouraging about youngsters, young kids in schools. Under the age of 9, we think they're only responsible for about 2% of transmission.
Oh, Beth, do you hear that?
That's good. That's very good. So,
okay, well, Beth has a question. Should we ask her about her question? Let's see. I have told my students to start building up a tolerance for school time by wearing a mask when they are allowed to have screen time. What is the best type of mask for kids knowing they need it to be comfy and breathable?
Well, that will be this one, the cloth mask, just make sure, plain old cloth. You can make them with a sewing machine. You just want it to be somewhat fitted, a little bit fitted, goes around the ears. This is super comfy. I can breathe through it well. The only time this gives me trouble is if I'm exercising. And that's when I like to go to the triple layer of a thinner cloth, because I can breathe through it better.
The problem with that mask you're showing though with little kids is, what do they do with it when they are going to take it off?
How little do you mean?
Preschool. She's a Montessori.
Oh, she's talking preschool. Okay, well then I think one thing I think is fantastic about the Montessori method, they get kids to be self-sufficient and to do things on their own at insanely young ages.
Yes.
So you just teach the kids, okay, kids, here's how you take a mask off. You take off one loop and then go like this, and then you put it in your laundry basket or your mask basket or whatever you're doing. You teach the kids, we don't touch the front of the mask and we don't touch the interior of the mask. I bet you Montessori kids would learn that like nothing.
Can you put that on a recording, please? What don't you want? That's like a PSA for Montessori and masks, isn't it?
That's what Montessori has always been. I mean, I see 2-year-olds setting tables and doing stuff that, I mean, it's just how they inculcate a sense of responsibility, and we're all in this together, and you explain to the kids, you can get sick if you do it this way, and then they help each other. If one kid sees a kid making a mistake, say, oh, don't forget, don't touch the outside. And, they make it a game even. I don't know how they do it, but they do it, right?
Yeah, I remember when Adrian, my son, he went to preschool. He wasn't in Montessori, he was in Reggio Emilia, which is a similar philosophy. And I remember before he was 1, I walked into the infant room where he was, and he was like in the room where they do the changing, and he was crawling up by himself on a step stool to wash his own hands. And I was like,
No,
he
I mean,
wasn't even one. And I was like, is he really doing that by himself? And they're like, yeah,
yeah,
he
that's
can
the
do
whole
that.
thing.
And I
They
was like,
can do it.
whoa, it
We just
blew
have
my
a wrong
mind. It
idea.
was so extraordinary. I learned so much. I could
Well, I
practice a little
did
bit
too.
now
From
I'm
the
parenting.
Montessori people, they taught me we are totally wrong about what very young kids are capable of, and we treat them like they're dumb. They're not. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to do quantum physics or anything, but they're
Right.
definitely.
We underestimate what
We
children do. Right.
underestimate them badly. So I think the little kids, if they go behind the ears, they're colorful and pretty, and they all kind of learn. This is to help all of us stay safe and healthy, and teach them the right way to take off a mask and model it. And if you see a little bad behavior, to be honest, as we said before, if no kid is really sick, touching the front or the inside of the mask is going to be no big deal. My prediction is they're more likely to get a cold from doing that, than COVID.
Right.
But
So
because
then,
that kids at that age are it's pretty limited spread there.
yeah, as a follow-up, she says they also lick or suck on the mask, so there's a big wet spot. How dangerous is that?
Yeah,
And
you
then she
don't
said,
want you don't
and
want
Dr.
that.
Montessori always says, children of the world.
Yeah.
So
Well,
what do you do about that? The sucking and licking.
sucking. Yeah, you don't want when your masks are wet. You should change them out. Because wet masks don't do a good job, right? I mean, so once a mask, like tell them no. Try to get them to stop that if you can. Like don't suck on your mask. And if they do get wet, like I sometimes even have to bring a second mask to the gym because my mask gets so wet it's useless. And
So maybe the thing is that they need to bring spare masks with
yeah, have some
them.
spare masks.
Yeah. Okay. So Jean is saying, my son has heard that there are many people who have had no COVID symptoms, but are actually being COVID positive and having major internal organ damage. Is this
Yep.
happening on a large scale?
Well, let me say, I've not heard it. I've not heard people having no symptoms and having organ damage. I've heard of people who had it and recovered having those kind of things. What we're seeing, and again, we're seeing two things that are very unlike viruses, or certainly like flu viruses and stuff like this. We're the long haulers. People who are still sick 3 weeks up to 3 months later. This is very unusual with a viral infection. Totally different from flu, where you're usually totally better in 2 weeks. But we are seeing recovered people who are now fine, neurological sequelae, heart problems, just, organs all over the body affected. And how much recovery they'll achieve, we don't know. I honestly haven't heard about the organ damage with those who were completely asymptomatic and never knew they had. I've not heard that at all. I can check for it for next time, but that part I hadn't heard. But this thing can do an absolute number on you. What's novel about it is that most viruses, like Ebola, we know it doesn't transmit easily, but man, if you get it, you're going to be hellishly ill and probably die. Flu, you're probably not going to die from it unless you're very old or very young. You're going to be sick for 2 weeks, then you're better. But this thing, you have a range of clinical presentation from completely asymptomatic to do you know that the median time to death in hospital is 18 days, but it can kill you in a few.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow, this is really unheard of, that you've got the same pathogen with that variable a presentation. Now, again, what this points to is it's more about the host immune response than there are some things intrinsically in the pathogen, absolutely, no doubt about it. But yeah, it's the host immune status that matters a lot.
And sometimes we don't know what we don't.
You get surprised,
even the healthiest of people, right?
And some kids are
Seemingly,
discovering, like some of the kids who get sick, that's how the parents are discovering they have a problem that they never knew the kid had.
right.
So it's sad.
So Arnie's asking, is it safe to launder manufactured non-medical masks?
Well, I have actually seen some things online with that. Yes, in the early days, people they weren't laundering them. I'll tell you, this is what they were doing. They were hanging them in an oven at high heat or boiling them, okay? Boiling them in hot water. Now, I would say, is there really a need to keep doing that? Like now you can buy this stuff. So in the early days when there were PPE shortages, 3M ramped up its production. I did not think we had a problem with shortage now. But the reality is you can get almost the same, like N95s are the gold standard, absolutely. But just an ordinary 2-layer cloth mask is getting you a really decent result. And you can even buy more of them. So if you really want to look at that, just Google cleaning, industrial N95 masks, and you'll see some protocols for it. I don't know anyone who actually did it, and I never had that kind of mask myself.
Yeah, I think she's actually talking about non-medical masks, so she's not talking about.
No, I'm talking about non-medical. I'm talking about the industrial. And
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to talk a little bit, I think right now, and just so you know, for all that are here, if you have any more questions, put them in the Q&A.
And we got through them all.
We have. And if you are coming to us from Facebook, please put your question in the comment. And then in the meantime, Karen, you can go through some data that you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, there's some fascinating data. Okay. Something done. Now this comes from the end of April, but there was a prevalence survey done in Indiana. So things are worse, okay? What they did there, and this is an experiment, okay? They randomly sampled areas of the state to try to get an idea of how many people had been infected with COVID. And some were asymptomatic, so they did both antibody and PCR, okay? So what they found is that 1.74% of the population actually had the virus as of the end of April. Now, because of the nature of the sampling, how they did the sampling, they also did use some data for the minorities. They had to use a little bit data of who went for a sample. And then they were trying to look at what percentage of the population later got sick from the exposure. And their estimate based on how they did their sampling is that the true prevalence of the disease at that time was probably 10 times higher. So there could have been, instead of like 1.7, it could have actually been 17% of the population had been exposed to COVID. Now, what they did notice, and again, there are some issues because of this, people of color, the African Americans and the Hispanics, they didn't sample randomly, but they were finding a slightly higher prevalence in those populations for the reasons we discussed. And the fatality appeared to be worse in Hispanics than the African Americans. No, this is an observational result. There's no data about why. I would guess, but it's a pure guess, there might be more undocumented immigrants. There might be people more cut off from healthcare in the Hispanic population because they've got meat packeries, they've got agriculture there. So there might be a lot of illegal immigrants in that cohort that just don't have good healthcare. Whereas the African Americans are at least, they've got the benefits of citizenship for the most part. It can really depend on where, what kind of migrants you have. You have a lot of Congolese people working in the Midwest in packing plants and stuff. You'd be really surprised where they all come from.
Wow. Interesting. So, Subin has a comment here, and there's another question from Emily was just saying we prefer undocumented to the term undocumented to illegal. People aren't illegal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, just undocumented, people that don't have, green
Without
cards or
papers.
visas.
Yeah.
They don't have, permission to be living in the United States. So that's the suggestion, but that's not restricted. Those it's hard to predict what race those people will be because you have many Africans working there too, and they may or may not be documented. It's unclear. But that was just a hypothesis because we are seeing in some places Hispanic cases tend to be worse. Fatalities are worse there than with the African American population. And there isn't an explanation to date on why that might be.
So Zubin just has a comment. He says, there are several friends who have had COVID, have recovered and have serious issues following COVID. A 35-year-old friend has had to be on 3 different antibiotics since having COVID-19. Is this something natural or manufactured?
Oh, that's absolutely natural. It's like a third of the people who recover have some issues. Like either they're long haulers, but yeah, it's a very large percentage. Now we saw that with SARS, okay? We saw that certain people who recovered from SARS had some health issues following on. This is a lot higher percentage, right? But first of all, SARS was a lot more fatal, okay? And there weren't anywhere near as many people who got it, right? I think the total number of people at SARS was 8,000 in the whole world, right? So now this is such a bigger cohort, at least a third of them are having some problems like this. Either they haven't resolved the illness, they're still sick up to 3 months later, or they recover and then relapse, and then they've got some lung problems. And we don't know if this will clear up. We just don't know yet.
It could be a lifelong thing, like an autoimmune.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I think a lot of them will clear up just with time, but probably some won't. And
or like maybe a reset of their immune response or something.
Exactly. Some will reset it, but some are going to struggle long term.
It's interesting because both myself and Adrian were not feeling like we're tired, or something last week. And I was like, oh my lands, what if we had the COVID, didn't know it, and now we're having these symptoms, right? Because I thought it was weird how both of us were feeling fatigued and whatever it was. And I was like, oh my lands, something I would never have thought of before. But now it's like, well, that's an interesting thing to think about. I do have a question actually, and Jean's asked another question as well. What, in terms of the 1918 flu, how long did it go on? And I mean, I know that it was a 2-year cycle, but how long did people shelter in place? How long were people masking? What did that look like? Was it really 2 years that people were kind of self-quarantining, or what? Tell me about that.
Yeah, it really, in 1918, it was very dependent on your locality. Because remember, we didn't even know it was a virus that was causing it. We didn't know what it was, right? So masking, it depended on the city. There was also the same kind of bad public health response in the US, at least in some places where journalists and the government were kind of in bed together to try to minimize it, right? And some cities, that people were just saying, oh, it's just like the flu. We get the flu every season. But people knew darn well that it wasn't just like the flu that comes around every year, because people were dropping like flies. So the thing about the flu, it completely crashed. Now the flu is another thing that goes away in the heat, right? So there was a little bit of a peak. There were 3 distinct peaks with the flu. It peaked, disappeared completely, like peaked in the spring, went away over the summer, peaked in the winter, went away, and then popped back that next spring. Okay, the summer doesn't do well. And so many people got it. You know, the general thinking is by then there was herd immunity to this particular strain. And it had been mutating too, maybe adapting a little bit better. A virus generally does not like to kill its host because it wants to replicate more, you know. So a virus killing a host fast is a dead end for it.
Interesting. Okay. So Jean's asking, what's the difference between an N95 medical mask and an N95 industrial mask?
Okay, my understanding of it, and you know, I'm not quite a mask expert. The idea about the N95 industrial masks is to block sawdust and stuff. So it tends to filter better on the inlet side than on the outlet side. Because if you're exhaling, what do you care? You're not, you know, it's not as much of a problem. So my understanding about them is they're a little bit less protective exhaling. So they're probably not as good to use. You know, some of them are vented, some of them have thinner material. It's, but the N95 medical are basically two-way filtering.
Okay.
I mean, in the days when we had nothing, you know, do what you can find, right?
Right. Do what you got to do.
Do what you got to do, right?
So we have no more questions at this point. We're about 12 minutes to the half hour. Do you want to look at some numbers since we're here together?
I kind of shared some of the data that I thought was interesting. Let's we can check some of the numbers and compare different countries the way we usually do. Give me just a sec to get that called up.
And if anybody else has any other burning question that they haven't asked yet, you can ask now.
Yeah, I mean, there's
forever hold your
time for
peace.
a few last questions. I think, you know, we maybe are getting, and we should find out, do we still want to keep doing
you want me to do a poll?
Yeah, do a poll because
okay,
we're
I'll do a
getting
poll
to
while
the
you're
point.
looking that up.
And then, you know, you do the poll and then we'll look at these countries and see how bad they look.
Okay. Okay, I'm just going to do the poll that's, do you want to continue these webinars, yes or no, and how often would you like them? Is that good?
Sounds good to me.
Launch polling. The poll is launched, so I don't know where it, I think it should have popped up on your screen.
Yeah, I see it. I see the poll.
Oh, good, okay.
Because now there's a lot more knowledge and, you know, people want, you know, more sophisticated things, which I can certainly do.
Even if you're a no, please count yourself in because that's
put a no in. Yeah,
us.
count a no. So, because then we'll understand if people want to do that.
Although, again, we're preaching to the choir. They're all here. We're not getting the people that popped off early. You can, if you want to also share your thoughts about should we keep doing these on Facebook if you're on Facebook and how often you'd like them to happen.
And we can invite anyone who wants to be on the Marco Polo group. You can ask a question on Marco Polo and I answer it a day or two later. Like we're doing plenty of that.
So
but I think people are really sophisticated now. People know.
And then we also have a lot of other, not a lot, but a few other comments. Luann says, thank you as always for creating my island of good information. She's a fellow bright lifer. April says, yes, please continue. Elizabeth, AKA Beth, says, would love to keep it going, especially knowing things will change when the kids go back to school. Yeah.
And I want to show you, one of the first things I want to share with you is a back to school event. Want to see what happened when one country opened up for schools and didn't take precautions? Okay, I'm trying to get to, okay, let me share my screen and you're going to flip out. Okay.
I think Zubin, yeah, the poll does not show up on Facebook. It's only on Zoom.
That's true. Yeah, you got to be right on the Zoom for that one.
But
Okay.
thank you for
Can
your
you
feedback.
can you see my Israel?
I'm in the middle of a poll, so hold on.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Sorry.
not the right person to ask. Oh, hold on. Hold on. I'm the only person to ask. I've lost everything. I can't see anything. I'm a little delayed. I was on a call this morning. Not that anybody cares, but I was on the call this morning at 8 a.m. with Dubai.
Wow.
Had a great call with Dubai today for one of my clients. But I've been at it all day. It's Sunday. I worked most of yesterday and most of today.
Well, I hope you're making some serious do-re-mi there.
Oh, well, I don't know about that, but yeah, I'm grateful to be working. And
Yeah,
definitely
that's
grateful to be
true.
working.
We all of us who have jobs are super grateful.
I'm so grateful. So grateful.
Okay, can you guys see this blue
Yeah, I
line?
can see it now. Yes, thank you.
All right, now here's the cautionary tale. This was Israel, okay? Small country, you know, not a terrible.
Population?
I'm thinking 7 million, something like that. I
Okay.
can check it quickly. Small population, let's see. Could be much larger by now. Okay, 8.88 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so notice where it's just about down to zero there.
Yep.
I'm having a little trouble here. Okay. Okay, so where this down to zero is where they reopened the schools, right? And they reopened schools with no special precautions. They just reopened like usual. And look what happened. All of this is attributed to school spread. So the virus roared right back, spread mainly through schools where they did no protection whatsoever. So that's the cautionary tale for us. Okay. Now,
what was the time frame on that? Can you tell what the time frame?
I think they did it in May. I think this is where they reopened the schools.
Uh-huh.
So now let's go to the logarithmic form so we can see some other things. So Israel has very few cases, right? So let's go back. We always want to look at normalized by population because the bigger places are going to have tons more. So I want to call out, like, here's Sweden. Okay, Sweden is getting a lot better. All right. Let's go. Let me try linear for a second, just so you can get a sense of, where things were really crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's the United States. Okay, still one of the worst places in the world. Okay, Peru is bad. I think this is Chile. Very bad place, but they're getting it under control. That's US, but I think this is Colombia. Okay, there's Brazil, another no lockdown country. South Africa wasn't doing too well, but they're getting better, it seems. Okay, so let's look for Russia, because they've just started vaccinating. They approved their vaccine. Let's find Russia. I'll have to search it here because I can't see it. Okay. They approved their vaccine for use after they've done it, after the phase 1-2 clinical. So this is Russia. They're having a bad time. It's, going down, but now they're vaccinating large numbers of people. So they'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on. For Zubin, here's Spain. Okay, look at Spain ticking back up. They were one of the first hit and hard hit, but now they're getting better. Well, they got better and maybe getting a little worse. Still not too bad. Some of these are just like really bad situations here. So we got here, Belgium. What's this? Yeah, US. Yeah, so we're way above, like, now we just pass everybody's peak, Chile had a very bad problem because they they didn't take into account, they were doing pretty well in the wealthy areas, but they were having like very uncontrolled spread in a lot of the poorer sections of the large cities. So, but they're coming down. They're getting under control. South America, though, overall, Argentina's on the way up. You know, Colombia, yeah, Brazil, okay, maybe leveling. This is Colombia. Let me get that. Come on, can I get you? Okay, let's try to get you down here. That's Colombia, still going up. So, yeah, this is now, it's in our population. We'll have to see how good the vaccines are. I know we're all hoping for a vaccine that will be as good as the measles vaccine, and that, you know, we can virtually go back to normal. But, you know, if it's not that good, you know, we may have to still, you know, think about a little bit of protection.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think unless there are more questions, I think, what was the verdict?
In terms of the U.S., I mean, I'm sorry to those that aren't in the U.S., but I'm a little U.S. centric because I live here.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, so we are going down a bit. Can you talk to me just about what that looks like? Because it looks like we're heading downward.
Yeah, in
What are your
aggregate,
thoughts
yeah.
about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the thing that's been problematic about the US from the start, let me see if I can go to another thing. Places like New York, places that were early hard hit, I mean, are really paying attention. Like in some places, things are still improving, and in some places, they're still getting worse. So it's very mixed. So but overall, I think we are improving, you know, just definitely more than we were a few weeks ago.
And why is that? Is that because of the summertime?
I think that's part of it, but certainly not everything. People are outdoors more, and we know that indoor spread is 20 times, you know, higher than outdoors. Indoor spread is 20 times higher than outdoor spread, and people are outside more. The weather is helping us. So here's what we're looking at, okay? The dark red.
This is a good one to look at.
Yeah, this is now the latest. This bright, you know, maroon color, this is uncontrolled spread. Red is trending poorly, okay? Yellow is holding the line, and green is doing better, okay? Now, some of the green places, what's interesting to me is last week, all of New England is green, and now suddenly Rhode Island is red again. And, you know, Massachusetts has gone yellow. New Hampshire's gone yellow. Now, part of why the greens are greens is they're very good with testing and quick return. They're doing contact tracing, and they're looking at people. You've got a lot of places are doing this. If you land by plane or you drive, there are like border controls. Like if you're crossing the state line, you have to show your negative test, that kind of thing. Now, I've been hearing people say that they're not enforcing it. You can still go in if you've got a good enough story. But I've also heard of people not having that and being turned away. So I think it's sort of a mixed bag.
Right. I got a couple of questions here. Zubin saying it's interesting that summer doesn't help. Spain opened its borders as we were very dependent on tourism. When they opened their borders, they assumed that the lockdown would happen again in September.
That makes sense, you know, because Spain was ticking up, but Zubin, I would say that the heat is helping, because if it weren't for the heat, we'd be way worse than we are now. But there's no way to prove that except wait and see what happens in the fall.
And by the way, a lot of the Mallorca stuff is outside. Like you're eating outdoors, people aren't going to Mallorca to be inside. They're going
right.
to be outside.
People are outdoors
There's
a lot.
a ton of outdoor dining, outdoor markets.
Is Mallorca where the real problem is, though? I wouldn't expect that they're the worst off, right?
Probably not.
And are people going inside to bars? That we know is such a bad place.
Right. They have a lot of outdoor bars there too.
I know. I mean, I wish I were in one right
Oh,
now, don't you?
yeah, like an open air bar in the Mediterranean. Yeah, I'd
Oh
love
my
to.
God. You guys are going to laugh. Do you know that people are making masks now with little slits to drink, put a straw through?
Oh God, no, I have not
It's
seen it.
unbelievable. I think that's creative and I like it, because you can be at a bar and keep your mask on and still sip your drink. Okay, you got to use a straw, right? That isn't going to kill you. So
No,
yeah, I think,
that's
I
funny.
mean, I
That's
think
cute.
we've sort of said this. I'm optimistic. We're getting this under control. We've tackled smallpox, yellow fever, polio. We've tackled a lot
Malaria to
more.
some extent too, right?
Malaria, Ebola, we have an effective vaccine. We got stuff against some of the most god-awful pathogens. We have antibiotics. People aren't dying of the simplest things anymore. We'll lick this thing. It just may take a little longer
Patience.
than, you know.
Okay, so we got a couple of questions, and then we're sort of at time here. So, Jean's asking a question about breathing through mouth or through nose. My friend's logic is that because there seems to be no transmission through eating food, and that the testing shows viruses in the nasal passages, therefore it is better to breathe through the mouth. Is this true?
No, it's absolutely not true. Because the reason, if the virus gets in the stomach, chances are the stomach acids get most of it. It destroys it. It can't handle that. And, processing through digestion. The scary part is, though, if some of them survive, the ACE2 receptors there, you can get damage in your gut. I mean, there are ACE2 receptors in the gut too. Breathing through the nose, the whole idea of breathing through the nose is we have mucous membranes, we have cilia, we have barriers designed to catch these things and stop them before they get to the lungs. So, I mean, the idea is, inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth, that's fine. Exhaling through the mouth is more likely to expel. Like if you're infected and you've got viral replication in the lungs already, even in the upper respiratory tract, that's when you'll be sharing more virus. I will say though, if you're lucky, you get the virus starting its replication in the nasopharynx. There is some thinking that people inhaling directly through the mouth, you're going to bypass the nasopharynx and the mucous membranes that can sometimes gunk it up and catch it before it gets to a serious place. It can get in the lungs and get deep fast, and it causes way more problems the deeper down it is when it starts its infection.
Good. Okay. Good to know. April's asking, can we show Canada? And then she says, can you please provide the article or documentation of the statement in quotes, indoor transmission is 20 times worse than outside?
Yeah, that might be hard for me to find because that I heard on a press conference. So I don't think, you can try Googling that statement and you'll find where it eventually came from. I think it was Fauci that I heard say that. So I don't have the reference for that one. Let's see, you want Canada on the other one? Because this does not do Canada, this is US only.
Yeah. Zubin says that people are indoors at bars in Mallorca. Well, they're crazy.
I figured, yeah, that's the
I know. Well, that's the, like, when you go out, it's like when you start at midnight and you go until like 7 a.m. in Spain. Those are indoor places.
Well, but it's well known. There are very, very few here's how I think that number was calculated. We have a lot of documented cases of indoor transmission. We have very, very few cases of documented outdoor transmission. So that's where I'm guessing they did that calculation.
Yeah.
So here's Canada. Pretty good. Most of the population is concentrated kind of in a band, along the US border. So you're a little bit more sparsely populated overall. It looks like you're doing pretty good. You guys have blocked us from entering, which is smart.
Someone's thinking. Mexico hasn't done that.
No, I haven't heard
Yeah.
that Mexico has.
My brother has just come back from Mexico, and he said that all of the hospitals and Cabo are at maximum capacity right now.
Yeah, and Mexico,
Public and
let's look for
private.
Mexico too, because Mexico's got a problem. You know, South America
You're
is
welcome,
right now
April.
the place that's trending worse. Okay, like you can see Mexico trending upwards like nothing. It's Russia, a little bit worse than Russia. I thought Russia was worse than Mexico, but yeah, you know, there's some bad trends here. Mexico kept it out a little bit longer than we did, but it's there now. It's everywhere. It's across the planet.
And Karen, does New Zealand really still have 0 cases, or have
Pretty
they
close. I mean,
ticked
that's
up?
my understanding. Let's look for
Because I
New
was
Zealand.
talking to somebody in Kenya today, and they said that
Maybe they're starting,
New
yeah, like,
Zealand
look,
had something. It looks pretty darn
it
good.
looks like 0 to me, you know, it's,
Pretty flat.
you know, and the only place, like, they did stop community spread. You know, they
What's
don't
that
have
bump
any,
up? The bump up like on day 28. When was that?
I don't
What's the
know,
date?
because this is not
Oh,
by
it won't say the
date.
date.
It's not by date, it's by,
First case.
but no, it's by when there were so many cases per
Got
10,000
it.
in population. So all the dates are different for all these countries. What I can say is the last dot is the most recent date, right? But you notice how like Spain is way out here because it started, they had cases much earlier, but like, let's look for another one, like Ukraine doesn't go as far as Spain because it started later there.
Got it.
Um,
Got it. All right. Well, we are past our time. So, and the poll pretty unanimously says that people want to continue doing this, Karen.
Okay, well, it's fine. I just wondered, I just thought, are we still offering? I still think we're a lot of fun, and it's great to have some fun on a Sunday afternoon with Kristen and Karen acting medicine, you know, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, make sure you
Okay.
email. Like I've been getting questions on the Marco Polo, and those are pointing me to things I can research. Like, do you want to know how the tests work? Do you want to know error ratios for the new tests coming up? Want to know how these different vaccines work. Many of them are new technologies. You know, I show some stuff on the polos that I don't show here. So if you want to be on the polos, just send us your phone number and we add you.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
And can you hang on a minute or two, Kristen?
Well, why don't we call each other so we don't have.
Okay, we'll call each other. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Have
Bye.
a great week.
Thanks. Bye.